Hi, it's Ileana here at Awakening Cosmic Reality Show, and today I have with me Sherri Divband. Sherri is an intuitive energy healer. She has a wellness center in Bethesda, MD, called Intuitive Wellness. She is also the author of Intuitive Transformation Evolution and Divinely Guided, and this book can be found on Amazon.
Yeah, both of them are on Amazon, yes.
Good. Sherri offers sessions to help people overcome anxiety, past life trauma, clearing karma, and the removal of blockages by healing and merging their timelines. She has a passion for teaching children how to explore and understand their spiritual gifts, and that could be psychic gifts. She has recently launched Divinely Guided Children LLC, which is a spiritual and metaphysical center for children in Bethesda, MD, that offers in-person classes as well as virtual classes for anyone around the world. Welcome, Sherri.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
So today we're going to be discussing children and psychic abilities and what you do with children.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm excited. We just launched the center this month, February. So it's going really well. We offer in-person classes and virtual classes. So it's a lot of fun.
So how did you get started in this work with psychically gifted children?
Oh man, it's one of those things where one thing led to another. It was nothing's ever planned the way you think it is anyway. So I learned energy healing and animal communication first for animals. That was kind of my career path, working. I'm a registered veterinary technician. So I've worked in the medical animal field for a very, very long time, almost 20 years. And when I started having my own kids, that's when I started branching out and noticed, kids are exceptional, not even just my own, but, when my kids were playing with other kids and the things that they would say and the experiences that they would have together. And just their demeanor was just incredible to me. So I started writing the book Divinely Guided a couple of years ago. And it's based off my experience working with my own children and then other children. I did intuitive, energy healing sessions starting about 8 years ago for people. I transitioned from animals to people. And with that, how it kind of occurred was that parents would come to me and they would ask me about their kids in the session. And so I started doing more and more sessions for parents, tapping into their children, and then their children's higher self would come to me in the session, and they would give me a lot of information about their journey, their parents' journey, and all sorts of things. And the parents would find it very fascinating, and I would help them work through a lot of behavioral issues and things like that. And then the psychic abilities and the past life talk and things like that started coming up. And, a lot of parents didn't know what to say to their children or how to handle that, because most of them that I worked with didn't necessarily have any gifts that they're aware of anyways. And so when their children started talking to them about, their past lives or seeing angels in their room or their home or all sorts of things like that, they would email me and panicking, like, what should I do? And so that's kind of how it organically came together. And then the parents started bringing their children for me to do work directly with them, so that I could talk to their kids and let them know, hey, things are okay, this is normal, and help them work through that. And so that's kind of where the book came from. And then the idea was that after the book, the center would be next. And so it's not I can't say it was one of those things I've been planning for my whole life. It just kind of gravitated organically, which is actually a beautiful thing, because it's the life experiences that you have, right, that kind of make you who you are, and you travel into different time frames and experiences that kind of mold you and shape you into the person you become. And so it's a variety of different things that contributed to it.
So what kind of psychic abilities are kids born with and come in for you to work with them?
Oh my gosh, anything, you name it. But the reason for it, which is an important thing to talk about though, is I would say probably around 2000, 2002, a really big surge of new earth children. I don't like the word new age. I think that has a weird connotation to it. So I say New Earth children. And a group called Crystal Children came in right after the Indigos, which is my age group, which is 30s, 40s, and 50s, some early 60s. But the Crystal Children came in, and they were coming in this like abundance amount, this massive amount, this large group of children that really, their frequency is different, their DNA is different, they come in, let's just say they come in into love frequency. So they're very compassionate, they're very empathetic, they read people's energy without you even needing to talk to them. So these children kind of opened the door for all of that, right? So I started working with those children first. My 16-year-old is a crystal child, so I learned a lot through him as well. But when I started working with a lot of other crystal children, I started to see the similarities and the uniqueness of them. You know, they see spirits, they see angels, they see their angels. You know, my son said he saw Archangel Michael. You know, first time he said that to me, I think he was 5 years old. He would tell me he would see things in the house. And so they are psychic, they are mind readers, they are lie detectors. And so that was the first group that I really got to know. And that's the first group I talk about in my book. But these children, whether they're crystal, star, rainbow, or divine, and these are just names that I have been told. So there are probably many other categories that I just don't personally know about or I don't work with. But the children are all, whatever category they fall into or whatever their gifts are, they all are high frequency, meaning they come in a much higher frequency than you and I, or historically, like even our parents or further generations didn't even, you can't even compare, because our bodies were not ready to handle or withstand that vibration, you know, 100 years ago. So it's been a slow integration. Every generation, the frequency shift has been gradual, but these kids come in with a very high frequency. And so because of that, they have the veil is very thin between the spirit realm. So their metaphysical and physical realm is very blended. And so they are much more aware. Their senses are heightened. So they are very psychic. Some of them are very telepathic. Some of them see the spirit world. Some of them read energy. They see dark entities. They attract dark entities because they're so vibrant and so bright. What else? I mean, you name it, a lot of these kids can do it. The only difference is their characteristics may be different in their personality, but the frequency is very similar. Does that make sense?
Yes. Do they learn things faster here on Earth in school, intelligence-wise, emotionally? Are they more advanced?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of them are what we refer to as ascended masters. So they come in with very little to absolutely no karma, no lessons to learn. They come here to teach. So they are very aware, they're highly intelligent, they are ascended masters that come from all sorts of realms that are really here to teach. So, you know, it's interesting when you have a parent that has children or a child that's frequency or their ascension is much higher than their own, because it makes it for an interesting environment when the child innately knows they're filled with more wisdom. You know, that happened with my children a lot when they were little, and that's fun parenting, because it's like they know that you're the parent, but they have this other knowing that they are very spiritually advanced, if that makes sense. And that could come off as arrogance in a child, which is an interesting combination, but it's not arrogance. It's more of a knowing.
Mm-hmm. And so if parents are born with these children, what would you say to them? What advice would you give them how to treat those children and work with them if they don't know somebody like you? So say, you know, what advice would you give them?
So, okay, so that's a good question. My number one advice for the very first thing I say to every parent that emails me, calls me, contacts me in some way is just calm down, because this is a beautiful thing. It's a gift. So it's nothing to be afraid of. So that's the first step, is just relaxing. And even though it's something you don't understand necessarily, it's a beautiful thing, because we don't want the children to close off their gifts, because that's the problem with the majority of the population. If we can just pivot for a second, all of us, every single one of us, regardless of these high frequency children versus myself versus my parents and so on, everybody is born with the ability that these children have. But it's about our environment as we are brought up, the reactions that our parents have to the things we say when we were children. Oh, my imaginary friend, those aren't imaginary. Those are spirits that these kids are seeing. But the parents say, oh, you're making that up, or don't tell anybody. And then the children are worried about being different because their friends aren't necessarily saying the same things or saying they see the same things. So their environment shapes, or our environment shapes us. And so many adults are walking around completely closed off because at some point in their early childhood, they closed themselves off out of fear, out of worry, out of being judged, and not wanting to be different. And so everybody has the ability to tap in like these kids do. So I get an abundance of 50, 60-year-old, 70-year-old men and women today, to this day, coming to me saying, I'm starting to get my memory back. I'm starting to get my knowing back. What happened? How did it get closed off? And I work with a lot of adults on bringing their inner child back and opening that door back up. So my biggest advice to parents is make sure to make your children feel comfortable telling you, because we don't want them to close that door. And the magic year for that, when it really starts to happen, is the age of 5 and 6. That's the time frame where children really start to become insecure, or they don't want to necessarily be different from others. So they start to notice, are other children like this? Or if I say this to my mom or dad, do they react poorly? Do they think I'm weird? And so those little experiences add up, and then they decide whether or not, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that they are going to close that side of them off, right? So it's imperative that parents don't freak out. And so I always tell people, when I talk to parents, I say, if your child says something that is startling, like, oh, I remember you and I had a past life together, or, I see angels in my room, say, oh, wow, tell me more about it. And then have your freak out moment later in private and calm down then, but try to have a brave face for your children so they feel comfortable. Because I can't tell you how many parents have come back to me, and once they ask their children to tell them, like the floodgates open and the children just started telling them everything. And they email me back, oh my gosh, they've told me so many different things, and they're happy, and like the smile on their faces is haven't seen that with them for a while, because they are, our children react very heavily to the parents and how we react to anything. It doesn't matter what it's about. And so those are the two things that I kind of work with parents about. And then, this is why I created the Divinely Guided Children's Center, is because I wanted to create an environment for parents to send their kids to explore when parents don't necessarily know these things themselves. So, send your kid to an introduction to spirituality class, send your children to if they're really interested in crystals, learn about crystals class, or dream interpretation class, or whatever it may be that your child is talking about. I have support groups where children can talk to other children their age about what they're seeing or what they're feeling. And then I have parent support groups where parents can talk to other parents about, oh my gosh, my child said this to me, this is how I reacted, like a Facebook group, but virtual. And so, and I can't be the only one out there offering this. So I encourage parents to find support groups in their area, Facebook groups, or centers such as my own, where they can really help their kids explore, and then the parents can learn themselves.
So what can kids do? Like sometimes kids trust counselors and teachers in school, and if they start talking to their counselors about their gifts, psychic gifts and stuff, how should counselors and teachers respond to that?
That's a really good question, and it's very difficult to give you a specific answer on that because they're not trained for this particular thing, right? Like spirituality is a whole topic that I don't even think and it's not even a topic. It's more than a topic. It's a very important part of life that is not taught in schools, at least not traditionally. And so a lot of children, counselors and teachers are not prepared for these types of things. And so the worst, the best advice I could give a counselor or a teacher that's put in that situation is not to make the child feel bad about it, or shut that off, or make any sort of comment that they're not prepared to answer. So I would recommend that they say, oh, well, you should tell your parents all about this, and maybe encourage them in a way, in a positive way, so that enough that they feel comfortable, but not crossing any boundaries. But that's one thing that we really need to implement in school programs for counselors, because the problem is, this is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, or children that have difficulty there with hyperactivity or concentration, they're sent to a counselor, and this is very real. This happens all the time. Then they'll tell the counselor, I'm having trouble focusing, and they might say something like, I see angels in the room, or I'm distracted by this. The first thing they'll do is talk the child down and then put them on medication. And so right then and there, the child feels like, oh, wow, this is the reaction that I get when I am sharing these things. Maybe there's something wrong. Maybe it's not good. And so they begin to start that part of themselves starts to shut it down. And so that's why we need to have these children have a place for them to go, with people that are open and trained. So intuitive energy healers in the area, someone like myself that's not necessarily a trained counselor, but I am trained in knowing how to identify issues with regard to spiritual gifts and things like that can help coach the parents, because they don't need a counselor for this particular thing. They need guidance and they need support. And I think it's very difficult to get that in today's traditional counseling, but I know more and more counselors out there are opening holistic practices that incorporate Reiki and spirituality. And I know that because I've trained at least 5 or 6 in my area that have come to me specifically for this issue. How do I work with children? How do I work with parents or just adults that talk this way? And so I think that it's shifting and changing.
That's good, because we need more awareness of helping kids to come into their abilities, their psychic abilities, and not have it as a stigma that you need to turn it off or hide it or not be aware of it. It needs to change.
Yeah, it does. And it is changing. Change takes time. They say true change takes an entire generation, and I believe it, because I've been feeling this for over 20 years. And I see a huge shift in the new Earth children. And I can see, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when my kids are adults with their starting to have their own children, I could see a completely different environment. It takes a willingness for the older generations to open themselves up to the idea, right? Because there's a lot of stigma with regard to spirituality. One of the first questions that I got multiple times when I started advertising the center is, did we talk about the devil? Is this satanic? Is this religious? A lot of people are afraid to send their children to a center that says spirituality or metaphysical in the title, because they are worried that I'm teaching their children, witchcraft and religious connotations or satanic rituals. And I'm like, no, it's nothing like that. But again, if the adults aren't informed and educated themselves, there's no wonder that that's their first thought when they see something like this. So it's about reprogramming the adults as well, which is why, in my YouTube channel and a lot of the work that I do, I work with the adults as well, because they need help just as much as the children do, to be frank.
Yeah, like teaching, I wouldn't say it's a good idea to teach kids magic. I don't like to call it witchcraft. That's for adults more so than children. That's something, because learning magic comes with great responsibility and knowing what it is and being able to work with energy. Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm a certified Wicca practitioner, but I started learning that in my late 20s. I wouldn't suggest teaching that to kids, because that's powerful stuff. So
yeah, no, we don't teach anything along those lines at all. But those are the types of questions that I'm asked. Is this what you're going to be teaching my child? If I advertise Introduction to Spirituality and I call it Basics and Fundamentals, those are the questions that I'm getting asked. And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, it's, we're learning about your higher self and what's a body and a spirit, what's the metaphysical and physical connection, how do your emotions affect your wellness, what is a vibration, what are angels, what are spirit guides, what are spirit animal totems, like basic
Mhm.
information. There's no conversation about anything that could get anybody into trouble, or teaching these kids to do anything that would involve magic of any kind. Absolutely, that would be very irresponsible. But I do agree, as the children are, if they have a center like this to kind of teach them the fundamentals, then later on, as they become older, they become interested in learning more in-depth things. Then they're free to explore that. You
Yeah,
know.
and I think what your center also helps them, if they have like healing divine gifts, to later on to be able to become healers and able to learn healing, because what you provide is the core stepping stones for psychic ability, for accepting that in themselves and growing that and nourishing that. So later on, they could be healers, energy healers, Reiki masters, whatever they want to be, right?
Absolutely. I teach the kids Reiki. Like, I have a class this weekend that's almost full of kids that are 8 to, gosh, I think one of the girls was 14. So it's open to all ages, and under 20, because we're focusing on the kids now. But I'm teaching Reiki level 1 this weekend, and it's a combination of traditional Usui Reiki and then my style of Reiki that I've kind of developed over time, just as, and really just intuitive energy healing. But I mean, these kids are open and sometimes more willing to be, or not willing, but a better energy channel than adults, because they are so high vibrational, so connected to spirit, that it's easy for them. They could pick up Reiki in a half hour, where it could take me several hours to teach an adult, because their awareness is different. They're so open and excited about it. And so you can teach young children Reiki now, and then as they get older, they attune their gifts, right, to their age and their experiences and their understanding of energy as they develop later.
So are there Reiki classes for the children? Are they more simplified than the version that the adults learn?
Yeah, it's much more simplified. It's in terms that are easy for them to understand. The very basic fundamentals. What is energy? How to channel energy? How to protect yourself? Where's the energy coming from? How does the energy check? You know, influence your vibration and frequency. And so very, very basic. And then just practicing, and then as they go up the levels, they'll learn a little bit more. But it's very, very easy. I have a manual for the adults class that's like 20 some pages long.
Mhm.
And for their class, it's like 10, but it's like 18 font, big letters and different colors to make it easy to take home and use it later. So it's very, very modified for the younger kids to understand.
Yeah, because in my generation, like even 10 years ago, there was just Reiki for adults, not for kids. So
Mhm.
it's really changing. I think I commend you for doing that, because
Yeah,
it really builds the groundwork for these kids to be successful with their gifts as adults as well.
absolutely.
And it gives them more opportunities, because as time will pass, there'll be more need for energy healers. There is already now, and
Is.
for psychics or intuitive empaths,
Mm-hmm.
because as people are going forward with their lives, they need more healing. They need to understand more who they are vibrationally and spiritually.
Yeah, and your word, the key word you just said is empath. These children are extremely empathetic, almost to a fault if you don't understand it. A lot of the parents come to me and their children are so sensitive to their environment. How can I help them? What can I do? And so those are some of the classes that I teach as well. How to create boundaries around yourself. What does it mean to do that? Why do you need to do that? What does it mean to be an empath? And kind of the energy explanation behind it, because they are so extremely sensitive to the energy around them. And if they don't understand why that is or what that even means, then they're lost and they're going to therapy. These poor kids once a week talking to a therapist, and nobody can figure out what they're anxious about. And then the parent comes to me, and within an hour we figured it out, and the child is doing amazing 1 week later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they don't understand what's going on, and they can't articulate it in their language to a trained therapist, in order for them to understand it, break it down and figure out what's going on. Whereas I immediately know, okay, this is what's happening. This is what you can do. There's a huge difference. No, not that I'm better than a therapist. Absolutely not. They're trained for a lot of important things. But as far as energy goes, it can be actually quite simple to fix.
And as well, the kids are empathic, so they can sense other people's moods. They can sometimes sense other people's thoughts, energies, or what's around their environment. So how do you tell that to a therapist? The therapist will you're not mentally sane. The therapist might think that, but if they go to you, you're like, you're empathic. That's an ability. That's a gift.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many children have sat in my office and I talk to them about it. And I give them examples. I'm like, does this happen to you? And then after like a couple of minutes or maybe 20 minutes of talking, these children's face go from kind of like defeated and frustrated and confused to like this like joy and excitement. Like, I'm like, do you understand how unique that is and how important that is and how special you are? And they've like, it's like they never heard that before. And they have these beautiful smiles on their face, and their parents will send me updates and say, oh, they're doing extremely well. Their depression shifts, and suddenly they're not feeling like they're the only ones in the world, that one fish in the sea. They realize, gosh, I am a beautiful fish and I'm much bigger and vibrant and beautiful than I thought I was. And I need to share that with others, right? So it's extremely important, and I always tell parents, if your child is really suffering from other issues, I'm definitely not one of those people that say, stop going to the therapist. I say maybe your child needs to do both. So they'll come to me for the energy and the spiritual side, and then they continue with their therapist to go over the other issues, right? So I never tell any parent to stop taking their child to the therapist if they really need it. But sometimes they don't.
Yeah, because I mean, there's normal life things that they could work with therapy if they're bullied in school or something's going on in school that they need help with. That's what a therapist or a counselor is for. But the other things, the energetic things, the sensitivities, that's what they come for you to understand and work with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned that kids are telling their parents about past lives. Are they remembering past lives on Earth or galactic past lives as extraterrestrials or other things?
Both. I think the extraterrestrial ones are the ones that scare the parents the most. Like they'll say, "Oh, I was, a blue being, 6 feet tall. Don't you remember? We had long black hair and this and that, and we had 3 moons." And the parents are freaking out because they're like, "Okay, are they?" A lot of parents, unfortunately, what they say is they're making it up. They saw it in the movie. They're creating this experience that's not true, or this memory that isn't real, or they were dreaming about it. And that's the biggest mistake, because that really crushes their self-confidence and their willingness to share more things. But yeah, that's definitely the most challenging. I think it's less scary or overwhelming when a child shares an earth-based past life with their parent than an extraterrestrial one. Absolutely. And some of these kids are talking about time traveling, different dimensions, astral traveling at night, fighting wars and journeys and doing all sorts. I mean, I've had parents call me crying. My child is talking about going into different dimensions and time traveling, and they're literally having a panic attack. So, I mean, these kids, like I said, the sky's the limit. Sometimes there are days when I think I've heard everything, and then I talk to a child and I'm like, well, that's new, So it's constantly evolving and changing.
And how would you recommend to help parents whose kids say that they see people who have passed on, they talk to spirits, the dead? How would you recommend to help those parents? Because that's also a topic that some people feel very uncomfortable with, parents and relatives, when their kids come to them with that.
Yeah. There are a lot of different ways to handle it. It's tricky, because if the children are seeing family members that have passed and the family members are there to visit, it's always such a great opportunity to say, wow, that's great, grandma, grandma, whatever, is visiting, tell her hi for me. It's such a comforting feeling. Sometimes the parents are overcome with sadness because they miss that person so much that hearing the child say that they're there is almost too hurtful, because if it's not real, like why would they bring that sadness up, or something like that? And so they have a hard time channeling that sadness themselves, and so it can become frustrating for the children because they're so excited to say, hey, grandma, whatever's here. The issue is that children oftentimes see ghosts that are not family members.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the trouble comes in, because when these children are really open, there are ghosts that travel into homes. That's just the reality of the earth. There are things you can do about it, but most people don't. And so their houses are completely open, whether a ghost followed mom home from work and is in the house now, or they just wandered on the property, or perhaps you moved into a property where they're already attached to it. I mean, there are a million different scenarios. Those are the situations where the children become afraid, because who is this person in my house? Why are they looking at me? Why do they follow me around? And then they tell the parents, and the parents freak out. And so that's the situation I deal with most. And so a lot of times what I do is I tell the children to kindly, if you don't know the ghost, kindly tell them to leave and either go to the light if they want to. The older kids will do that. Or the younger kids just say, put a protective golden bubble around them and ask them to leave. And the less attention they give, the more likely they are to go. But the more attention that the kids give, the more likely they're to hang out and stick around. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all, there are a lot of things that we talk about and work through, but that seems to be more challenging, the ghosts, because they tend to scare the young children. They won't sleep in their room. They're freaked out, and then parents sometimes get so frustrated because they're like, are you making this up? Go to your room. And then the kids are really scared because they see, like, I have one child that I work with right now who has a lot of energy in the home, won't sleep with the door closed, gets woken up all night long. And so we're working with him on doing certain things to help. I work with kids on dimming their light. So before they go to bed, we do this technique where you imagine yourself as, those lights that you can dim, the dimmer lights.
Mm-hmm.
These kids' bright lights are so bright, their energy. So when they go to bed, I teach them, okay, now it's bedtime. Imagine in your mind that you're turning the switch, the thing, and your light is going way, way down into nightlight mode, because then you will be less attractive to any passerbyers, and they will likely leave you alone. That's why they leave the adults alone, because our light is not as bright and we're not as fun to interact with. And when they see a beautiful little child with this vibrant light that's expansive, it's warm, it's inviting, and they are attracted to it. So it's just, there are little things that we can do to help the parents and the children work through those things.
And you mentioned when we started talking that sometimes there is entities and things that are evil that are attracted to kids' light, and they're almost like entity attachments. So how would you deal with that?
Yeah. So if we're dealing with something more like that, that's when you have to really take more measures as the parent. You might even need to call somebody that that does energy clearing, home clearings, things like that. I do that. I don't do that personally, but I do that oftentimes when I feel like it's too much for me to do, or too much for them to do themselves. So we always start with the basics, like, okay, Palo Santo or cedar your home. I don't like sage. I don't think it's used appropriately. It's more, in my opinion, ceremonial and blessing, not necessarily to remove negative entities. So I always say use Palo Santo or cedar and clear your home with your intention, with the smoke. Open the windows, get various dark stones over the doorway and the corners of the house, like black tourmaline or hematite, onyx, obsidian, things like that. And then you can also put selenite 6 in the corner of the home. So clearing the home, doing what you can yourself, creating crystal vortexes around the bed, putting it on the doors, things like that. And if none of those things, and then of course, standing your power. So if you own the home, then you say, it's harder to do this in an apartment building, but and there's other steps for that, but really just having the parents hold their power and say, demand that they leave. This is my home, you must leave. And then what I do personally, myself for my house, is I ask that Archangel Michael come every single night. I have like my nighttime ritual where I ask the archangels to surround the house, to protect us, and put each one of us, and I say each name, in a golden bubble of light of protection. And I do that every single night. And so if none of that works, then you also have to have your child not interact. You know, if they, I'm going to give you a quick story, if that's okay.
Yes.
My 5-year-old son, so the crystal child that's now 16, when he was 5, we were sitting in the kitchen one day, and he's looking, it's just the two of us home, no one else is there. And he's looking around the kitchen, and he says to me, he says, "Mom, is there such thing as dark angels?" And I had never talked to him about anything before. So this was coming out of left field for me. And I said, "Why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, because I'm looking at," and he's looking in the room. He's like, I see some. And I said, "Well, what do they look like?" And he says, "Well, they look like regular angels, but they're black and they're really scary. And they're looking at me and making mean faces." So imagine me. This is the first time I'm experiencing this ever, because that was my first child. He was 5 years old, and I'm like still learning about all of this myself. And so again, I didn't react because I wanted to scream and leave the house. But I was very calm, and I thought about it for a second, and I even said to myself, "Sherri, don't freak out. Don't show him that you're afraid." So I simply said, "Jordan, what you need to do is you need to tell them to leave. And then after you say to leave, you do not engage. You do not look at them. You do not show them any attention, and they will go away if they're not bothering you. But if you keep watching them, they'll stay." And he said, "Okay, Mom." And he said, he did his thing. And then like they never came back. Like I kept asking him, "Do you see them?" He's like, "No, they're gone." So it was like a very pivotal moment, but I had him stand in his power, and I didn't show fear so he wouldn't be afraid. And he took control, and he didn't interact or engage. So I always tell parents, make sure to tell the child not to engage. And then if all of that fails, not that it failed, you're not failing, but if they're still scared or they're still seeing things, then you need a professional to come and clear your home, which is completely out of my expertise. So I always refer out because I don't particularly enjoy doing that part myself.
Yeah, I do energy clearing in online sessions, but I can even do it energetic, a home cleanse. But if a person wants a physical one, they should call somebody who does physical cleanses of homes and energies.
Yeah, I absolutely believe, because I have a woman that I refer to that only does distance clearings in homes and does an incredible job. And I've, at this point, after, I don't know, 8 years of using her, I've never had anybody come back and have any issues. So I think that works just as well. And so, if parents that are watching this are having issues, there you go. You have somebody here that you can call to help you.
Is it okay if you mention her name just so people know who to reach out to?
Oh, no, I was referring to you.
Oh, well, I do distance ones, but if they want somebody in person, like in your area, do you know anybody who does it in person?
No, I actually don't know anyone that does in person. The woman that I used only does distance healing. I'm sorry, distance clearings.
And can you tell me what her name is?
Her name is Paula Snellings. Okay. I can email you her information later. She's incredible.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of different work, so sometimes I'm available and sometimes I'm booked up. So I could refer people to her as well.
I highly recommend her, and I use her probably 2 to 3 times a year just to do general clearings on my own home, and so she's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And my next question is, how do you help kids who have psychic interactions with extraterrestrials?
That has been more recent than ever. Years ago, I wasn't hearing about that. And I'm wondering if also because of the ascension that we're experiencing and the frequency shifts on the planet, that's very new, very new, for me, at least, that I've worked with kids, it's been in the last probably 6 months. And so, I tell children to always call on their guardian angel. Or Archangel Michael is the one is the one I use the most. And I say, call on your angel or somebody that you trust to always be with you when you interact with anybody, to make sure it's safe. And then I teach them ways to feel the energy. Is this good energy? Is this bad? Are they what are they saying to you? Are they asking you to do anything? And we talk through what the communication is about. And if their archangel or guardian angel is with them and they can feel their energy and the interaction seems to be helpful or positive, then I say go for it, and then document. For the most oftentimes this is for older kids, like 10 and up. They will write notes, or they'll tell their parents about it, or they'll tell me what they saw or heard. That's why I created the kids support group specifically for that. Like, I have a specialized one that's virtual for kids that are between a certain age, that are more advanced, meaning like they time travel, or they talk about different dimensions, or talk to extraterrestrials. It's for that, so that they can share and talk with other children their own age. But that's kind of the way I go about it right now, is to ensure that they're protected. Who are they communicating with? What are they trying to communicate? And kind of use their own discernment, which they're still developing at a young age. But if you teach them the basics and the fundamentals, and to take fear out based on how they feel like energetically, like how do they feel with that energy? Is it make you feel good? Do you feel like you're uneasy? Do you feel uplifted? Those are the signs that I teach them to know if it's good or bad, as opposed to using, big words that I would use with adults and different things. Like for kids, it's just very simple.
It's interesting. I've come to some experiences with people who don't believe in angels or think angels are evil. So if their kids have protector angels, how do you deal with parents like that are skeptical or have bad opinions of angels? How do you deal with that?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't come across that yet. I always tell, this is a rule that I have, a divine rule, my agreement with spirit. Because I am not in the business to convince anybody of anything. I've never done that. I refuse to. Like, if you either resonate with what I'm saying or not, but I don't try to convince anybody of anything. So I always tell spirit to send me people that are open to what I teach and how I guide people, how I guide and support. And so at this point in almost 10 years, I have had maybe one that I had a bad experience with. And that wasn't even that bad. So maybe it's that spirit is listening to me and only sending me the people with parents that, even if they're not necessarily against angels, they're open to it. And then that happens a lot. They're like, Sherri, because I always ask, are you comfortable hearing about past lives, or do you believe in angels? I always ask to gauge who I'm talking with. And a lot of times, greater than 50%, they will say to me, you know what, I'm not sure, but I'm open to it. And I said, great, that's all I ask. And so I haven't had experience with the negative yet, but what I will say is, in my classes that I teach, whether it's children or adults, I always have a protective component. It doesn't matter what I do. Everybody should be protecting themselves when they're trying to tap into energy. It doesn't matter if you're meditating, if you're doing Reiki, whatever. You should be protecting yourself, because you're vulnerable to your environment if you're not careful. And so I always say, call upon your guardian angel, archangel, or if you're not sure, you don't know, call upon the universe to protect you with golden light or something like that. So if the angel is not appropriate in the situation, or they don't necessarily believe, then I say, well, just ask the universe to surround you with experiences that are only for your highest good, or only surround you with energy that's only for your highest good. So it basically means the same thing, but it's less specific. So that's kind of how I handle that in those situations that I'm not sure.
Have you had kids who do channeling or who are psychic, and how would you let them parents know, well, like how can their children express that and actually work with those abilities, like channeling and the psychic stuff?
I mean, I feel like the same rule applies to pretty much anything. So I tell the parents, first of all, don't react poorly. Let's get more information, investigate, who are they talking to? But when I talk to the children, because I have one kid that communicates, and when I'm talking to him, I have a really hard time understanding, because he's channeling most of the time. And I can tell he's channeling because he's not looking at me. He's like moving side to side, and he doesn't even know what he said. So and the parent is literally sitting there like, what do I do? And, this is a virtual session. So the parent and child are on the screen and I'm listening and talking and interacting. And so I always ask the child again with their version of discernment, what's their name? What are they saying to you? What's the guidance you're being given? Make sure that, judge how you feel first. How do they make you feel? So the same thing that I said before when communicating with extraterrestrial beings or ghosts or anybody, I teach them first the energy, how like to use their senses. How do they make you feel? What are they saying? What's their purpose? What's their message? And parents really should, if they have a child that's highly intuitive and channeling a lot, they really should be monitoring what their children are getting. Meaning, if they're not present, ask their child if they, who did you talk to, and they can make their own journal. Okay, this, they talked to this person today. Most oftentimes it's going to be the same. It's consistent. Like they have a guide, a spirit guide that communicates every day. So that's the one they're talking to. And that's okay because the messages are going to be positive. But if there's random beings coming in, then that's when the parent has to really get involved and make sure every single time that the messages are safe, because otherwise we have no idea who they're communicating with. And that's when the parents get really uncomfortable, and then they'll contact me, and then we'll do sessions. I apologize, my battery is dying. I didn't even realize. The parents will contact me, and then I'll do sessions with them to help them figure that out.
Mm-hmm. And what if kids are interested in what's called tarot cards or oracle cards? Do you have courses that help them with that?
Yeah, so I'm really excited because Tarot by Janine, who's has several YouTube channels. She's been on the Spiritually Raw and several other interviews. She has joined my school. And so she's offering a 4-week intensive course on the children that really want to learn how to read the cards, how to use them. So I'm really excited about it. And so it's a 4-week class that she's teaching. It's an hour once a week. I believe the age group that we've started with is 12 to 16. And then she'll create another one for an older group. So we're trying to cluster the similar age kids together. But tarot cards historically are a divination tool that is very powerful and very helpful and a useful tool. But a lot of people feel like along the lines, a lot of people didn't want us to use them because they are such an effective tool for people who are able to tap into a higher awareness and receive a lot of very helpful guidance. And so my rule of thumb is, if your intention is pure and you want to use them for the right reasons, and you know how to do it correctly, and you're calling upon protection and doing everything the right way, then my kids will pull cards all the time. They have fun. They're like, oh, what's my animal card? They'll pull a card. So it's very light for the younger kids, right, just for fun. Now for the older kids that really want to learn to use it, Tarot by Janine is that's how she goes by. So I don't actually even we don't give her last name out in public, but she's on my website and she's offering a class starting next month. And so anybody who has kids out there that are interested in learning the cards for real, like really how to use it, because I offer a fun 1-hour workshop at my center where kids can come and we play with the cards, and it's very it's a fun thing. But if they really want to learn how to use them, Janine's the one that teaches that class, and it's going to be really popular. I can already tell.
So what bits of wisdom can you give us about psychic kids and any important messages that you have to share?
Just that they're everywhere, and if you have a psychic child at home and you don't know what to do, the first thing is just, taking a deep breath and just realizing that it's a really exciting, wonderful thing. And once you realize that, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with your child, then it can be really fun to explore with them. And there are children all over the world, all age groups, different unique categories, like I talked about in the book, Divinely Guided. That's the one I go into, specifically different types of kids. And, the book is for them too. So when young teens and adolescents can read it and really understand, why am I the way I am? Why do I think this way? Why do I react this way? Why am I really comforted by this, but not that? And then parents can also read it to recognize that a lot of these children require parenting, different styles of parenting with each child, which can be very frustrating. And it takes a lot of patience. I encourage a lot of the parents to read their own books, to learn about spirituality themselves. So that way they're kind of geared and ready when their children come to them with certain things. That way they have a little bit more of a foundation themselves, so that they aren't so surprised when certain things pop up. And so those are kind of the main things that I can recommend.
Yeah, so for working with psychic kids and their parents. What would you say is good crystals for kids, for beginners?
Ooh, so I have my go-tos. So definitely the dark crystals for sure. So we have black tourmaline, obsidian, and hematite are probably the best three best ones you can get for protection and grounding. So that's very important for them to have that part of their basic foundation. So we want to cover the protection part. So rose quartz is my next favorite. That one is a great calming stone. It's good for parents to have them in their bedrooms to help them sleep. Put it under the pillow right next to the bed. That's a great one because it's like a love vibration. It's very calming and soothing. And it's a great one to help with stress, anxiety, things like that. And then my other favorite is selenite. It's very purifying, it's uplifting, it's raising vibration. It is also protective, so it can be placed around in their room. It's an amplifier of energy. So if they're feeling really great, then you can hold on to it. If they're having a bad day, it's not the best stone to use because we don't want to amplify their anger or sadness. So they can hold the rose quartz in that certain circumstance. And my other favorite is amethyst. I think amethyst is such a beautiful stone, and the energy is really purifying. It's not too intense, because some of these crystals can be really intense, especially for sensitive kids, when they touch them. And if they have too many in their room, they can have trouble sleeping. But those are my 4 go-tos that I always recommend. And they're really easy to find, and they're not that expensive. Some of the larger stones are, but those are kind of a great starter set.
Wonderful. And is there anything else that you would like to share with us today?
I think we covered a lot of different things. I would just encourage parents, if they're interested, to check out divinelyguidedchildren.com, see what classes that we're offering that your children may be into. I doubt that many people watching this right now are in Bethesda, Maryland, so we do offer a lot of classes virtually. Literally every day I'm adding to the schedule as new teachers come on board, or we add a variety of new classes. So check it out. Check out the book Divinely Guided. They're on Amazon, along with my first book, Intuitive Transformation Evolution. That's the one that would be more for adults to learn a little bit more about spirituality and our emotional well-being and vibrations and frequencies and things like that. So I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah. And how can people contact you if they have questions?
They can contact me on my website. So intuitivewellnesscenter.com is my main website where I work with adults. And my email is Sherri@intuitivewellnesscenter.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sherri. I really appreciated you being on the show with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It was just a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you soon again.
Sounds good to me.
Bye. Bye.